And welcome back, episode 79 of the Leonis Report, everybody. JB and I here on another Monday night with everybody. Uh, we don't have any news yet, but we're still going to find some stuff to talk about, per usual. But before we dive in, what's going on, buddy? How you doing, man?
Doing pretty good. Had a great weekend with the family. My son, we had him in a something called the Spartan race, which was pretty popular, I think, maybe 5, 10 years ago. But we found that there was like a kid's version and he was really kind of wanting to do some obstacles and things like that. So it was actually held over at Fenway Park.
Oh, yeah.
So you got to like run through the stadium and through the seats and everything. And it ended up being like a beautiful day out too. So had a great time doing that. How about you?
That's awesome.
How was the weekend?
Not that exciting. I mean, we didn't do a whole lot, I think, Friday, Saturday, but today we had Veterans Day off. And so today was kind of like my chores around the condo day, and so I went. I was like painting the front door and painting the trim and cleaning outside because all the fall leaves and just junk that's everywhere. And pretty low key overall. I just did some gaming, did some sleeping, and we're in hibernation mode here now because uh, nighttime is 4:30 for us. But
Oh,
we
it's
got
awesome.
some good plans coming up. At least we are going to Connecticut next weekend, so that's kind of our we chill this weekend and go ham next weekend. So.
I actually had to work today, so I didn't have that luxury of being off. But it was a really low key day today, and I mostly actually work with federal customers in my job, so um, it was pretty quiet from them. I don't think anybody was really doing anything.
No, it was technically a federal holiday, so hopefully they were all just
Yeah.
chilling. Yeah, but good stuff. Well, we do have a topic lineup for you. We are going to touch on Justin and Friends is airing again on Thursday. We'll talk about that real quickly. We are going to spend the beginning of the podcast talking about the Ice Jayden unit that is announced for JP. That I won't spoil it, but we'll get into it then. We will also talk about Nichol and Nichol's vision card that are also coming in, what they're doing for some unique paid options that they have not done before. We also will likely be getting Dark Veritas imminently here, and a little bit of what they're doing with the game for him and rewards and how you get his shards and all that. And we will do another segment of hot takes, which we did this last week with tactics, where we have 5 statements that feel like they're kind of controversial. We'll see if they are or not. We'll agree or disagree. And then we will segue into a little bit about the meta in the top 10, which has had some really cool events this week. I don't know if everyone's heard about it, but we got some stuff to talk about that are a direct result of the 5th anniversary. So very cool to see some shakeup at the top end. And then we will get into the tier list discussion where we don't have a ton to add, but we have the tactics units. We had a couple other units, a little bit of shuffling, so good time to revisit it. And we will finish things with a Q&A. So please get your questions ready. Obviously, we'll answer whatever we can throughout the stream, but if there's anything super duper off topic, feel free to save it for later, and we'll try to get to it all. But we'll kick things off here with the very quick, just touch base announcement, if you will. Oh, that is not the right screen. That is my replay. We're going to show you after. Here we go. Justin and Friends. I'm on it again this Thursday. It is airing at that 6 p.m. PST. I am confirming with Justin, though, because we've had the daylight savings time shift, if that really is the actual time. I know there's a difference between the standard time and daylight time, but regardless, they are doing another stream this quickly. I actually didn't anticipate this. I kind of thought they would do the Justin and Friends that they did a month ago and then just kind of let it settle, but they're ready to go with another one here. So that's obviously very, I don't know, positive that they are putting the time back into the game. That to us was always a signal of how invested they were in. So I like it.
I like that too. We definitely kind of gave that feedback, and it was something that felt across the community, and people were asking about it in the discords. And unfortunately, still radio silence from Hiroki. Hopefully, he's doing well. I don't know if he's still involved in the game, or maybe he's moved on to another project. But the Justin friends are usually fun, just to kind of hang out and chill with the community. Usually not too much in terms of like game information, but um, we should actually be getting the news probably tomorrow, in terms of what's coming this week.
That's a great point. Yeah, so maybe that'll be a little bit of a news announcement too, because they do typically have some kind of news, but it is not always forward looking. It often is like a slightly backward looking, but we'll wait and see regardless. But we will segue into another segment here about Ice Jayden, which is one that I don't think really has any details at the moment other than he's a magic scaling missile unit. But I'll let you take this away. You have a prediction that I agree with about what you can expect time wise and all that good stuff.
So I don't even know. I don't even think it was confirmed that he is magic scaling. I think that is,
Oh,
just kind of a prediction on our part, just because, his other two variant or two of his other variants are magic scaling missile, and even like his piercing unit is magic based. So seems like it fits, but on the other hand, if he's going to be fitting into the new missile team with Una, card wise, is that going to line up, in terms of card optimization? If you have, a magic based one and a physical based one, maybe not. So I guess we'll see. You're right. There's been no official information drop. He's actually going to be coming out in JP this week. And it's been my thought, basically since we got all these fifth anniversary stuff early here in Global, that we're going to be getting him simultaneously. So I actually expect that we're going to get Jayden this week as well. So Thursday or Friday, depending on when the update drops. So that's going to be a surprise for us. New unit, it's going to have all new details. We don't have Una yet, so he doesn't really have all the goodies. But Ice is a good element right now. So yeah, you got Gilgamesh. You got some others in there as well. You can mix in. So Agrius obviously is a big one. So maybe we'll be seeing a lot more Ice here shortly.
definitely. And quick call out, Crimson Lease just posted in chat that they also thought Odaiba mentioned it in the translation stream. That might have been where I heard it. I don't think I ever saw an official infographic, but I was pretty sure I heard it somewhere along the line. But obviously, when you're hearing
Okay.
things through the grapevine, maybe not everything's accurate. So,
Yeah, maybe I'm wrong about that. I didn't actually watch the translation stream. So
same. But no, I
we
do.
were kind
Oh,
of.
good.
I was just going to say one thing that we were kind of talking about before we got on the stream here was we were looking at Yuna's kit and what she can do, and it seems like in terms of like what he could potentially bring to the table, it seems like a general dispel would be a huge one, and the barrier break as well. And although there is sealing and counterplay for those things in the game right now, it is a bit more limited in terms of the range because most units are working with a 5 to 6 range, and these missile units we know can be 8 range or some potentially even better. We don't know what the details are yet, but that could be a way to sort of get around and circumvent those seals early in the fight.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, that's. I also agree with you on your prediction that of the simultaneous release, there is precedent for this, even post Road to Worldwide, where units like Helen of the Black Rose and June the Spring Celestial, they were simultaneous, and obviously all of our like event units in terms of seasonal units are typically simultaneously too. So I don't think that's a far stretch, and that would be pretty awesome because I think he should likely be a commander as well. So it will be kind of an early look at what that could have from a trickle down effect. But before we kind of even go into that, I do completely agree. Like we were just thinking about what could he bring to the table, and Yuna's a great jumping off point, figuring that she's a very likely partner, that they wouldn't really have any kind of overlap with each other. So this is kind of like the Sottily Crimson Wizard discussion again, where you're like, hey, like you have two different units. What do they do to complement each other? And I actually think that's genius. That right now, with all the Dispel Seal, not only is it there on Exia, is it there on Shreka, but it's also on the Dark Veritas unit that we have yet to talk about, who just got released. So there's enough of that going around that this seems like a really creative way to maybe get ahead of it and either nullify some kind of buff at range, or do something to, like, I think Fina can reduce, or no, Cloud can reduce the effectiveness of those buffs. However it might be, that seems like a perfect thing for him, considering that we are in a bit of a buff power creep, and maybe there's some CT nullification shenanigans on there, and that's also a big one. So that seems like a really great meta-defining thing for him, given that we are seeing pretty widespread. But yeah, I'm excited for him. That's really all I'm thinking about, though.
I'm thinking that he's going to be like a heavy area of effect missile unit too, just to kind of really take most advantage of Yuna's tracer capability. Drop a huge diamond, and hit the whole team, and then get the follow up on all 3 of them. Seems like that always worked really nicely with Sephiroth and Gilgamesh. So I can definitely kind of see that for him.
I would agree with that, and that's ironically something I was just thinking about when I was looking at some of these units. One of the things I've noticed as of late is that those diamond abilities are very much decreasing in how liberally they're being put into these kits of the various different characters. If you look at a kit like Nichols, who we're going to imminently here, you know they're going for this larger X shape, which is the same thing that Garusa has, but very much so skewing toward smaller AoEs. Obviously, Yuna is very unit oriented. Even Pain here does not have a true diamond ability anywhere. Riku does not have a true diamond ability anywhere. So they're absolute. Oh, I'm sorry, that's a mistake. She does have one, but the idea is that it's not as prevalent as it once was, where lots of diamonds are being flung around with those large AoE wide res kind of like being the way to combat that. It seems really interesting that maybe Jayden does go back to that, and maybe is kind of like the, you know, we're going this direction with all of these smaller AoEs and unit scaling, and he goes the other way to kind of keep the diversification there. In addition to the whole logic of the follow up, that does seem plausible.
I mean, especially if he can dispel wide res or shred, area resist. Um, you have a recipe for a pretty powerful unit there. But I did want to say though that these, you were talking about the simultaneous release, and there's been precedent for that for the last year plus. And just to kind of piggyback on that, we have seen that those units have been the biggest kind of meta movers. Not only because they're kind of hype units, releasing at the anniversary, they usually are like, popular characters. They've also, been good, but because of the fact that everybody pulls for those units, that is what truly changes the meta, because then you have to actually account for them, some units are very good, but a lot of people just don't pull for them. Like Garusa, for example, he's, some people did pull for him. But he's not going to be showing up in, en masse. At least he hasn't so far. So, that is kind of a recipe for the meta changing, is the actual pull and play rate of those units.
I actually really like you brought that point up, because I want to circle back on that later when we talk about the top 10 meta in terms of adoption rate being a big factor in how the game balance changes. But before then, yeah, I mean, I'm excited just to see if they have any kind of alternative takes on him as a missile unit. We've had some discussions in the past about why that group of characters hasn't evolved with the game. There's obviously a whole set of X's and O's in terms of range advantage or disadvantage. There's been talks around how they're typically not as bulky, and so they're just flat disadvantage. We know that reincarnation wise they're at a disadvantage for what they prioritize for stats. So there's a lot that I'm kind of looking at here still, because even Yuna does not seem to do anything really new for like a missile perspective in terms of how she falls outside of the regular move -1 and just pew pew from afar. And even units like Veritas of the Bolt haven't really done anything new missile wise. I'm curious if Jayden maybe kind of does something different.
It would be interesting if they kind of brought some interesting mechanics to him that we haven't seen before. That is always the most exciting for me, is when they kind of innovate and bring something new in to kind of change a little bit how you think about or how you play the game. So, yeah, I mean, we've talked about it so many times with the missile units that they've just essentially, since the ice missile meta with Alaya, that was really the last time that I can remember that it was really a dominant force in the game. Since that point, it's really been absolutely dead. I mean, there's been a couple flashes here and there where maybe you could mix it in a team, especially like in limited,
Yeah.
contexts.
Yeah.
But outside of that, yeah, that the survivability is not there. And I think the reincarnation, we talked about it before, was really one of the, I think, nails in the coffin for them. So we'll see. I think it's going to be good though, because I think Yuna is fairly promising in my opinion.
This will be a fun topic. Do you think it would be appropriate if they retroactively here decided to change how they do reincarnations for missile units? Like, I don't know if this is salvageable other than just flat out changing it. But obviously, that would, there's no precedent for them ever changing any reincarnation stats, and that actually might piss a lot of people off that maybe already maxed their unit, or I don't know how they would pull it off. But this seems like a big thing still holding them back. You think it would possibility of that?
I mean, I feel like they would have done it by now if they were going to. So I'm not even sure I trust them to recognize all of the problems that are there. So yeah, I would think that they are not going to do anything about this. I mean, we talked a little bit too before about like the focus on decks for these units, and that it's really the worst stat in the game overall, of like the major ones. I mean, we even like kind of tossed around some ideas of how to salvage it, like where you could just really amplify the deck scaling and their attack modifiers.
Yep.
But they still haven't done that yet. Like it's still only 35% for Una, so nothing is really changing there. So the fact that they emphasize it so heavily here in the Dream at the expense of luck, which is not only an accuracy thing, but it's also a survivability thing with like crit evasion. And then, just the subpar HP where they are even getting less than like healers and mages. Like that doesn't really seem right, especially when they're starting at a lower value as well. So I don't know. Like I said, though, I still think it's going to be good. Um, we'll see. We'll see though, because this is really the proof is in the pudding when Jayden releases.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I agree. It's nothing wrong with them focusing on decks. To me, it's just even the magnitude they went here. I was pulling up Grusa for comparison. A regular physical damage dealer gets 56 decks, and the missile units get 70. I can tell you right now, 14 decks is not going to do anything. The difference between how high a missile unit can get or not, and even their crit rate of 14%, it's less than what these units get. So even that little bit of extra dex that these units get, that is at this point in the game more of a contributor toward crit rate than it is to accuracy, that extra dex is completely offset by the fact that the physical units have 6% flat more crit rate innately. Like nothing about that makes sense. And then you consider the HP difference. Like that to me is just a pretty jarring difference to give them half the amount.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the attack is 50 plus less as well. So
Right.
yeah, across the board, it's just worse.
Agreed. But we won't belay the issue any longer. We've obviously talked about it at length, but it probably is more topical than ever given that Ice Jayden's coming out. So that is going to be a discussion that we are having. But before,
Yeah, I mean it's a big investment. It's a brand new team, 2 new units. You're gonna have to maybe get some new cards in there as well. So those are the kind of nitty gritty that we need to look at to determine is it actually worth it to invest into, because it's going to be quite substantial.
I agree totally. But we will also likely get, if that's the case, that they are going to release them. They typically don't, to my knowledge, delay the units. They will still get our regular cadence of stuff, but maybe they will delay it. But I know, like, for instance, the Halloween Elia release, they didn't delay Exia. We still got Exia. And even subtly, but no, that happened more recently, too, where we got a unit at the same time. I think Joom, actually, when Joom dropped. I can't remember who was running. But
Aldoa.
yeah, we got the same week.
Joom and Aldoa at the same week. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so provided that's the case, we may then get Nichol here, who is a Final Fantasy Brave Exvius old school unit. This was a very cool announcement for them to make. It's a 70 cost water unit, which I do like that cost for that element. I do think their 70 cost and lower cost options are not my favorite. But Nichol, very cool here that he is, I don't want to call it a counter to anybody in particular, but he looks very strong versus Shreka in particular. But that really could go for many units because he does have this niche. I'm sorry. Before we talk about the kit, I want to talk about how you get him. One of the coolest things they did with this unit was it 2K get paid guaranteed, and you get this unit at level 120. That was it. That's a first, and that's exceptional for 2K paid. You get this unit at level 120, like that. That seems like free money for them, quite frankly. That's an amazing value.
Yeah, I mean that was something that came in JP when he was released a few weeks ago, and especially over there, like they never get deals of that caliber in the past. So hopefully we get it as well. I think there's going to be a lot of disappointed folks if we don't. So I expect that we will, kind of as bundled into this anniversary kind of lead up that we're experiencing. So I agree, though. He is like an anti-magic unit. Like he's seems to be very strong against the Shrek and Sephiroth combo, obviously being water based. He gets like the magic and slash resistance, the crit evasion there, and he can pass that on to the party, which is really nice. He is a re-raise unit, which at least Sephiroth is unable to remove, but Shrek, on the other hand, she can remove it. Looks like he does get like a lot of unit resistance as well, like both in like his passives and then in his buff. So That's going to help him against those follow-up attacks. I think he's like a debuffer there as well with some of his attacks, like reducing
He is.
magic attack.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the Lilith, like a magical version of Lilith, I would say,
Good
where he
comparison.
gets like the magic attack on hit, and then I think he does also on his one of his attacks as well, if I remember correctly. So
Yeah.
I think he actually looks pretty good, pretty solid, especially for 2K, like getting him as a fully built unit. That's man, like, that's what, like 20, $30 at the most.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and if you think back to like when everybody was super excited about Dwayne when we got him, that was a $50 deal. And you still had to build him. If it wasn't, you had to still get the 600 shards for him.
Right.
So $30 for 120 unit, that's 1,000 shards. So yeah, I love that.
Me too. Me too. Yeah, and like he's got a really interesting mechanic here that his big cross shape is to increase unit res pen for enemies. So that's like some of those units like Shreka who do have some of that innate unit res pen. This is kind of a counteraction to that, where this is similar to, for a long time we had defense pen within the game, and we saw units like Summer Glassy come in that would like decrease defense pen. This is that same kind of counterplay to this, and he's got a lot of great stuff. I mean, he can dispel magical honeycomb, which to this point is few and far between. That's basically Shreka's limit break. And I think Yuna can do it too, technically, even though it's the magical. I think Yuna can, but this is also the Dispel Haste. I mean, he's got some great teammate utility to that on a couple of these abilities, restoring AP and restoring CT, and he's even got this buff to throw out 20% reduced physical damage to an ally. Like, there's a lot of great mid-fight utility there on a pretty liberal range overall, 4 squares away. This is a really compelling character, and just before we get too far ahead of it, we are going to talk about the Vision card, which is also 2K paid for free. And I don't know if it's maxed, but
It is.
amazing. Like for 4K paid,
Yeah.
incredible. But yeah, this is a great unit. I don't want to move ahead too far in case we wanted to touch on anything, but
I wanted to say a
yeah,
couple of things. Like the one kind of issue I can see for him right now is that a lot of people are using Luciel, who has kind of become the new meta support in place of Summer Resnick. And that's a little bit of a problem for him just because of the heavy water resist that she puts on the party. On the other hand, though, he does on his limit burst have a huge water imperil of 38%, and it's in a long range diamond. So that I think at least counteracts that a little bit, where he doesn't dispel it, but he offsets that and kind of resets that to 0. So yeah, just wanted to throw that in there for some theory craft.
it's a good one. It's a good one. Yeah, I mean, either way, I'm looking forward to him. I'm debatable whether I'll actually go for him or not because I've been on the fence of how I use my paid Viz as of late. There's a lot of really good characters. We have a lot of Vision cards coming out, but I think my own strategy is that I've been saving paid Viz to spend on units, and this might be as good a value as we'll get. I would hate to pull him later and build him from scratch. I think I might just take him and run, if you know what I mean. Plus, actually, not for nothing, I actually talked myself into it. I actually will buy this because I actually appreciate Gumi doing this. If money talks in the game and they take anything away from this, I think more people would appreciate this. That for 2K paid, you get a 120 unit. Yeah, he's not going to be gangbusters meta, but for like a newer account that you just want to play and be semi-competitive, like that's as good as a bargain as you can get in any gotcha game, quite frankly.
I agree. I think that for people that want to that have been kind of on Gumi's case, and we have too, for not having kind of good value, lower cost things, a 2K for a fully built character, or as almost fully built character, you do need to transcend him.
Yep.
Um, that's as good of a deal that we've ever seen in the game. So
Yep.
um, I'm definitely going to show my approval for that and definitely buy him as well. Even though I don't necessarily think he's a meta unit by any means, he is going to be a good competitive unit, though, I think.
Absolutely agreed. Yep. And his vision card that we'll segue here to now is quite frankly a good vision card. It's for book, it's for glove, it's for sword, red mage, and staff devout. That's like as awesome as you can get between 4 different current meta like magic scaling classes. Sword, red mage obviously can be more physical, but there are some magical. Oh, Gilgamesh. Sorry, I'm thinking Gilgamesh when I think Sword Red Mage. Regardless, it's a 15% agility card, 20 Spirit Pen. Amazing. You'll get the full value of that 20% because this is a main slot candidate with the 48% reaction block rate, which actually is really nice for this damage type because there's a lot of counter abilities, particularly ones that proc like healing or survivability or damage reduction that are very specific to like only slash and magic type damage. This reaction block will help mitigate some of those counter abilities. Now the quest, 25 crit damage, whatever, but it does have the 10% unit res as the bestowed. Like this is a really solid vision card, quite frankly.
Yeah, I mean, especially if, within Red Mage, if you weren't able to get your hands on Chariot, this is another agility card now for Red Mage. I really do like that reaction block, though, because of some recent developments in the meta with Sadali and Garusa,
Yes.
who both of those characters imperil your reaction block by 50%, I want to say, and just kill you with the reaction abilities, especially Sadali. He's like,
Awful.
can hit you
so
from
bad.
like a such a long range too with them. Um,
It is. I want to point this out because it's the one that's mistranslated here. Is it on hit? I think
it's on hit. It's on hit. Yeah.
Oh yeah. This is the aura. So he creates an aura, and this is improperly translated. We really should talk to Bismarck about getting this fixed. This is pretty big. This is decreasing enemy reaction block rate by 50%, not increasing it. So yeah, that'll greatly allow Sadali and Garusa to use their counter abilities more frequently because the enemies will have lower reaction block rate. And so for someone like Sadali, who's got this, where are you? Pretty awesome, like, preemptive ability. Is it preemptive? No, it's reactive. Regardless,
Reactive, yeah.
very long range. It still does a ton of damage. Like, it's still very powerful for how often it hits.
Yeah, I've seen him do, 10, 12K sometimes with this, if the enemy's debuffed or doesn't have much in the terms of like spirit or unit resistance and stuff. So
Yep.
yeah, he's a monster with that once he gets that aura going.
Yep.
But yeah, so I like having the reaction block as a main slot candidate, paired along with the agility, something that you absolutely need there. So yeah, I think this is another great card if you're trying to build around these particular job groups: book, glove, sword A, staff B. So yeah, another banger card for staff B glove combo. That's the other thing. This Exia slash Sadali team, which has
Yep.
been one of the best here for the last couple of weeks, gets even stronger now because you can throw this in the sub slot instead of using like the Black Rose card.
Yes, absolutely so. Right, and that's an offensive bump for them too, given they'll get some of that spirit pen there for sure.
Yep.
I like it. All right. Well, on that note, we are also getting the potential Dark Veritas unit, the final of the Veritas units, as far as I know. I think this is the last one of all of
Yeah,
them.
yeah. This will be the 8th. Yep.
Yeah. We're actually going to do some discussion around the Veritas units in general, but Dark Veritas does look very good, quite frankly. 100 cost unit. He is in the Greatsword category, which is kind of nice to get another Greatsword unit here. I'm still of the opinion that although this was a meta team for quite some time, A2 I think has kind of faded enough that it's really just Joom and Cloud really hanging on for dear life, that I think Greatsword is primed to get another person to kind of give them some life potentially. Pain, and we're going to tie her in here, is also Greatsword, so I think the combination of getting two Dark Greatsword units also kind of smart, that you can pick and choose, or both. We are going to talk about the pros of both, but there's unfortunately not all the info that we want here because he's not 140 yet. We don't have the limit break yet, but we can at least look at some of the strongest points about him. And I know when I look at units now, I quite often will look to their teammate buff and look to like what their like main damage buff is to kind of get an idea of like what their soul is, like what their purpose is. And he is, like we were just talking about, one of those seal all buff on hit for self. Now this is not for teammates. I think X-Ace is for teammates, so hers is a little more oppressive than this one is.
Yep.
But still super valuable because he's also got the seal barrier break here, 25 AoE res, that's some slash attack here, and he does also have some extra physical damage. So he does kind of like ramp himself up damage-wise from a couple different ways to do damage to you, and he's got this great 60% unit crush on this guaranteed hit that's going to absolutely smoke some of these, evade units if they're not prepped for it. You also have a select 2 that is a 60% slash attack in peril as well, or crush, if you will. We use the word crush to imply the percentages here, but this also has the healing power down on it, and as we were just talking about, a decrease of counter chance here. It has a new kind of value because there's a couple enemies that can reduce your reaction block rate. Well, how do you counter that? Well, you just reduce their counter chance by 100% instead. That way you don't even care about your own reaction block rate. You reduce their counter chance to 0 functionally, and you don't have to worry about that whole interaction. So even this has a kind of like a new value to look at it with. This does look like a relatively strong unit. I really haven't done much in the way of stats or bulk yet to see where he stacks up there, but he's very strong on the defense pen, and that slash resistance crush seems more than adequate to take some people down a peg from their slash res. I like him. This is great.
In that party buff, I think you didn't notice the barrier destruction seal as well.
I mentioned it quickly, but I probably should have emphasized it more. Yes, this is definitely yeah. Huge.
Yeah, having that's 2 of like the best seals in the game, with the general dispel and the barrier. That's incredible on a free unit here that you can pair that with Pain, who you mentioned, also a free unit. This is going to be amazing for players that are kind of coming back for this collab. Maybe you have just come back for Final Fantasy Tactics, and maybe you don't have a lot of competitive units yet. Here's a couple of essentially another team core that you can run here with 2 very strong greatsword units, and to kind of get you on your way with kind of a slashing team there. So yeah, I think this is phenomenal. I think obviously he's not fully built yet. We do need to wait for the quest to come along. His LB's not there, like you said, but I think what we do have here looks very, very nice in terms of what he's able to bring, not only as a new look to greatsword. They haven't had those kind of seals outside of A2, who, like you said, is faded away, and they haven't had a dispel sealer ever. So
right,
that's really, really good, I think, for that team.
I agree. This is a very interesting TMR to me too. I've had to read through this a couple times, but this is like dispel debuffs and increasing slash res pen. I'm intrigued by this one a little bit. I got to think about it more, but that was
actually interesting. Yeah. So if you crit, you are going to be dispelling any debuffs that have been applied to you.
Yeah. This is newish. But I did want to touch on 2 things. One, no, I did not call Pain a he. I know Pain is identifies as female, so I know. I don't. Is that confirmed? I heard how she identifies, but to the naked eye and to all we've ever seen in script, yes. And the second thing, JP in chat asked if we could remind what the difference is between an imperil and a crush. That's a good one. Good question. So they both reduce your resistance. That's what they both functionally do, but an imperil is a specific percent reduction. And I'll bring up Nichol again here as the example. Nichol will reduce your water resistance by 38%. So if you're at 10% water res, you're going to go down to negative 28%. Now you can reduce this amount by using debuff weakening for all those percents of debuff weakening. That's kind of the counterplay to this. But a crush looks at your number and reduces it by a percent. So like for this crush here, he will look at slash resistance, and let's say your slash resistance is, I don't know, 20%. He will reduce it by 60% down to 8. So the idea here is that you can never go negative with these crushes, but these have the benefit of that characters that have like super crazy high resistance, like 70%, 80%. We saw this during AoE res meta. You will get more value out of a crush than you will a flat imperil, because the crush will typically reduce more of the percentage when it's a lot higher. So they both have pros and cons. I think crushes in general tend to be better on average, but imperils, the right kind of imperil, if you can bring someone down to negative, that's still super, super valuable. Anything else you want to add to that or expand upon?
Yeah, so it depends. Which one is better really depends on how much, of that resistance that they have. So the way that I think of it is an imperil is like a flat based, so there's a flat number. And like you said, this is a percentage based. So which one is so if you look at a 38% imperil like in Nichol's case, if somebody has 0% resistance, or that's going to bring them down into the negative. But if somebody was hitting you with a 60% crush, we'll just say that an elemental crush shows up and you have 0% resistance, it's not going to do anything to you because you don't have any value to crush. So it all depends on what values you have for your resistance.
That's a good take on it. Thank you for that. Yeah. That's also well said. So, all right, that's a good segue. We haven't talked about that in a while, but I think that's most of what we want to talk about with Dark Veritas. I think the one key thing that we were going to highlight was the cool synergy here with Pain. That not only are they Dark Greatsword users, but one of Pain's biggest, we'll call it like teammate utility pieces here is the haste capability. And so if this is a way that her haste can be protected by a fellow teammate, that seems to line up really nicely. So I thought that was noticeable when you first look at both of these units in conjunction with each other.
She does have a barrier as well. She has a 7,500 physical barrier as one of her main buffs. So
Yes, thank you.
they're like made to go together from the ground up.
Yep.
So yeah, they're going to be an excellent combo.
Yeah, they're a cute couple when you put them together. That yeah. But we will segue then to our like hot take section here, where this is where we wanted to talk through some opinions that we think could be hot takes. We decide these questions and we will debate them, yes or no, agree or disagree. We did this last week with the tactics units. These ones we had to think a little bit harder on because I don't know if there's as many hot takes per se. One second. But we will look at the first hot take here, and this is number one. Veritas units aren't worth investing in. This was actually a hot take that was discussed. This was like debated hotly on the subreddit this week, where I got into it with someone because I was telling everybody that they're great units, quality units, and everyone should be working on them in some capacity. And his rebuttal was, well, no, they're not used in top 10 guild wars, so they're useless. Don't do them. And I think that's a really bad take. So I guess I'm giving my hand away here. That yes, I'm sorry, I disagree with this. Veritas units absolutely are worth investing in. That's my takes, but I'll give you the microphone here now.
I absolutely agree with that. I think that these are 100% free units. You don't have to spend anything to get them, and they're, for the most part, you build them just by playing the game, doing tasks that many of us would be doing anyway, and actually gives you a reason to do some of those tasks if you didn't do them before. Gives you like some kind of reward, some kind of gardening you can do by daily chores and things in the game. So at that point, there's no reason really not to build them, especially as they've continued to and showed that they're enhancing these units over time with equipment, with new accessories that they put into the game. And I presume we're going to continue to see that going into next year as these units kind of come along their normal cycle for mastery abilities, and updating the equipment maybe to a +1 versions or whatever, +6 versions, whatever. So yeah, I think that's also the culmination of the quest with the Dark Veritas. You do that quest with all the Veritas units that you've built up over time, so that's another part of it. So
We didn't even mention that. I totally meant to mention that. Yeah, actually, can I pause for a second for Dark Veritas?
yeah.
Yeah, that's how you get him and how you fight him and how you level him up, to our knowledge, is that you fight him with the current Veritas units. So if you don't have any of them, you can't get him, number one. But number two, there's apparently a lottery associated with the Dark Veritas. I don't know the details of it, but there is something with them. So they are kind of going all out on the Veritas release, because they are also giving out, and this was a special shout out from, I think it's Winsil on Discord, WYNSIL. I didn't know this. They give you 1,000 Viz for clearing his stage in multi or something to that effect. There's something really like above and beyond they did to kind of cap off and celebrate the finishing of the Veritas whatever. But I wanted to mention that. But yeah,
that was something that just came to JP this week. It's kind of like the Moraga event or the Ashenmont event with the multiplayer where you all kind of go to defeat the boss, and then there's going to be a lottery where
thank you.
You can win a super like high amount of Viz. At least in JP, I think there was a 500,000 Viz pot for a few players, and then there's a bunch of smaller prizes. But very similar to what they did with Ashenmont when he was released back in April.
I
So
love it. I love it. But yeah, there's other kinds of content besides Guild War, and even then, in your average guild, the quality of play, I'm sure, is liberal enough that you can still use these units. And even if it's not Guild War related, I'm sure there's places in Arena where these units are still very valuable to make your elemental parties. I know if you're trying to clear like reliquary quests, it's a nice free unit of certain kinds of element to throw in there that are competitive with the difficulty of that game mode, which is kind of necessary to get the best equipment in the game. So you're talking about a free, compelling unit to help you clear that. I can't think, even if you don't build them every single week and max them out, you can still do the content to get the medals and do it later. Sure, you don't have to be on like the cutting edge week in, week out of building them, but the only one that might cause you difficulty is the arena, because you really do have to spend some time to actually like farm your 5, and if you want to actually place high, you will have to do some orb refreshes. So yeah, that one for the water Veritas and the ice Veritas, probably a little bit more effort, but the rest of them, like guild, you get lightning and light for free in Guild Wars. You just get it, and even free match, you don't even have to play the match. You just enter and leave immediately and get your same medals.
I was going to say that we've been kind of harping on the Guild War and PvP stuff, but a few of the units are like absolutely starters on top raid or top guild raid teams as well. Like I know that the winning score for the Earth team, included Earth Veritas. Ice Veritas is also like a monstrous PvE guild raid unit. So yeah, they have that angle as well.
I love it. All right, well, that brings us to our second hot take here, and that is that Veritas of the Water is the worst of the bunch. This is yours. Is this a hot take, or is she the worst of the bunch?
I think that this is a hot take. I purposely made this kind of
Controversial.
over the top. I don't think that she is the best one by far, but she's definitely not the worst one. And there was some time earlier this year where we were using her. To be honest, I think that I would have been a little bit disappointed with her, in terms of like her anti-magic role. She hasn't felt as strong to me there.
Nope.
And I think that's because of the nature of her anti-magic is like an all-element buff, which could just, Sephiroth just laughed at it and dispelled it every time. And then the barrier, everybody can dispel the barrier, Shrek and all these people. So because she didn't have the seals baked in to protect those things, that was a huge problem for her so far. I haven't gone back to test her with Exia, kind of since she's able to protect the all elements buffs that she brings in. That I think, could be a significant boon with her. I haven't tested her as well with the new vision cards that have come for Devout, which, are a huge boost for that team. So I think that she's gotten kind of a new life here recently, and maybe it's worth taking out again.
I would agree. I think my only problem with her is the difficulty for the average player to use. Her AI, if you're considering
Yes.
staff devout teams, because Lucille has negative hate with her weapon, Angela starts with negative hate, and then even here, your main utility of what she was like rolled out as is the re-raise given to ally and self, but Lucille also gives this on her limit break, and even then this has that decreased hate after the effect. So if you're talking about like buff order and stuff and spacing, this unit is like way more complex than I think most people are ready for when it comes to a staff devout team. So that's probably where some people might find that she's lackluster. I don't
The
Oh yeah.
movement with her buffs too is also part of that, where she doesn't actually go all the way to the middle unit. If you're having her move in, she kind of sits to the side and
Right.
or is able to hit it and then move forward. So that's kind of part of that same AI discussion.
I would agree, yeah, and I don't think she's the worst Veritas unit. I don't know if I have a strong case for which one is. I actually want to lean Ice Veritas might be the weakest for me, but that's not even, and that's obviously auto PvP bias. He's obviously amazing in other ways, but I think, yeah, that's a whole other can of worms that we can probably talk about more at length. But do you want to keep moving on here to the next one then?
Yeah, I think that's a good segue.
Oh shit! I just. One second, guys. So the other hot take here, number 3. Oh my god, was Veritas of the Ice is the best of the bunch. I forgot this is number 3. No, this is a scorching hot take. He is not the best. I can say that for a fact, though. I can't say definitively that he's the worst. I don't believe that. But I can definitively say he is not the best of the bunch. I think there are others that are better.
I don't think that he is the best, but I personally think that he's actually very, very good. And I think that he's the as of right now, I think that he might be the most usable
Yeah,
because of Agrius, because of Gilgamesh. So I think today, right now, if you were to ask me which one is the best, which is the most usable in a PvP sense, he might be like towards the top of my list, if not the best one. Because he can stand up, he can at least take a hit from Shrek. He can take a hit from Exia. He's got Shell. And he's going to be with Agrius, who can kind of help him out a little bit there as well. It's got the status effect angle. I don't know. I think that he's actually pretty decent in that mono ice team, and you can even put him into the Katana team, which is another kind of big feather in his cap right now because Katana is incredibly strong with Garusa and Sephiroth, and I've actually been playing with that team in Arena with the three of them. I know a lot of people have been maybe going for like Sid or kind of doing the red mage Katana or maybe going with Kadaj as like the third, but I think that he's because of the amount of people using wind right now. I think he's a good play.
I can't disagree with any of that. I like it. I just know that I used him a couple times, and his lack of any kind of real self-sustain innately. Yes, he did take a hit from Shrek, but then he was dead on the second hit from whoever came up next. So he's very good anti-physical because of that barrier that he starts off with, that he can just at least remain full health for a while. But I have not tried him with Agrius as of late, so that absolutely might have tilted the scales for things. But I don't want to.
In that mono ice team, like because he's got the barrier break, he can. If you aren't able to one shot Shrek, like if it's a really built one, Gilgamesh can then just follows up and kills her. Same thing. So but like if it's not a built up Shrek and you've got like yours max reincarnated with the accessory and all this, he absolutely one shots her with his barrier break.
Agreed. All right, that brings us to our next hot take. All Veritas items are a must. Each Veritas gets an item that you can farm after the fact. Sometimes it's a weapon, sometimes it's a accessory, I think. Is this a hot take, or is it true? Do you have to farm all Veritas items?
I think this is a bad take. Yeah, I don't agree with this one. I think that there are a couple that I do like. Like I like the Veritas of the Water Staff, like to kind of enhance her AP deprivation angle. I do like the I don't know, the spear for Veritas of the Wind. It's
Yes.
okay. It's not bad. The katana is not bad for Veritas of the Ice. The Earth one, I think, is the standout, is the absolute one that you can absolutely skip.
I agree. It's awful. Yeah.
But I think like the weapons, they're okay. I don't think that they're like you need them right away though. Like I think that with the reliquaries weapons, if you don't have somebody else in your party that's using those, I think in most cases you'll just use those.
I totally
The
agree.
accessory is the must one. That you absolutely need for them to be competitive.
I would agree with that. And the name of that accessory, the Guardian Crystal. Yeah, this is a definite must. I would agree with that entirely. But yeah, the where'd you go? The Earth one. This is by far the worst. You can absolutely pass this accessory. This is negligibly good. If even, I'm not even talking about it. It's no bad.
Well,
Stuff.
the thing is for that unit, like one of like the drawbacks to the Veritas unit is you absolutely need that the Guardian Crystal in there. So that's taken up one of your two slots.
Right.
And for a tank like frontline unit, you're absolutely going to want to have like Maximilian on him, like pretty much always.
Yeah.
So that that you don't need this equipment anymore for him.
I completely agreed. Yeah, no, that's this is a hot take. You can pass on most of these items. I think some of them are absolutely worth having, but no, all of them are not a must. And this last hot take, we were kind of reaching for a fifth one. This is one that I wanted to speak to a little bit. The hot take: Gumi shouldn't put Veritas units into the War of the Visions lore. we've actually seen them in the lore. Jayden will summon the Light Veritas on multiple instances throughout the fights, where that's kind of his like special secret weapon. And technically, Gilgamesh is a Veritas unit, like the actual Gilgamesh unit. That's the extent of which they've put them into the lore. I actually am hesitant for how they might introduce them or keep them here, because I don't know how strong or what the overlap with the FFB storyline would do to for like a complexity's sake. I think the storyline of FFBE is like kind of obtuse sometimes in how complex it is and how in depth it is and how much history there is and how far they built that out. That I think one of my concerns is if they brought the Veritas units into like the Wotive lore, like what are the implications of that? But I've always looked for that as a next step for Wotive, is to marry the two games together, because obviously they're related. I would love for them to still like play on that, but I do wonder, like, to this point, characters like Rain and Reagan and Fina are just Easter eggs. They're not actually real characters in War of the Visions. But if you do more with the Veritas units, Reagan is a Veritas. He's the Dark Veritas. What does that do for like the lore ramifications? I think that's like kind of thin ice, depending on how they do that.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that it could go poorly. I mean, it depends on how well it's written at that point. I think that it could be cool, and like obviously they've been part of the reliquaries where, they're part of the whole story with Lucio and
Yes,
the library keeper. That each stage has its own elements that you fight up against at the end. Um, so I'm interested to see kind of the culmination of that with Dark Veritas. Maybe we'll see more lore drops there, more potential tie-ins that, or maybe even some branches that they could do just that and kind of marry the two universes together. On the other hand, maybe they'll just kind of keep it as more of like a side thing, like the Warriors, the Crystal has been, and just kind of have little Easter eggs or nods to it in the mainline story. I've always thought it might be kind of cool, if they're involved in some way in fighting back against the Realm Scourge, and that's kind of how they bring the two universes together, where they are summoned in as visions. We know there are visions in this universe, but they still have some cognition of that. From they still have some sentience about like being there and what it means. So um, maybe they could all be summoned in to help in that situation.
I would love to see that. That to me would be the best case scenario of them using the Veritas units, having them be a vision that they're just an Easter egg at that point of sorts, that they summon these soldiers from another universe, and Gilgamesh, however they want to finish his story up, because he's technically a Veritas unit, how he got here and his relationship. But we'll see. There's a whole universe after this storyline that I have no idea where they want to go. So maybe this is the route, which I don't know. I have to trust the process.
Yep.
But we are getting at that 52-minute mark. We're going to talk through a couple last topics here. We want to talk about a little bit of the meta in top 10 and some really cool things that have been happening, and that'll segue nicely into our tier list discussion, which not a lot to add, but still, want to go through it. One of the things that's kind of been taking top 10, there we go, top 10 by storm as of late, is this new team that we lovingly call the 2PM, and we name it after its creator, 2PM, from Valeria, the guild of Valeria. And it's functionally Gilgamesh, Lucille, and Shrek. And this team was put together in Valeria, you can see, has risen this week and done very well, where they had Drew, final boss, the number one guild in global. They then beat Chocoboss. They then beat us. They then have continued to run the gamut. And these other guilds, like Final Boss and Chocoboss and Ashura, have functionally stolen, we use that term, but like that's what it is. They copy and paste. They've stolen that build and used it as their own defense walls. And this like huge resurgence of these three units. And it's been really cool to see, because this would not have happened, I think, without that select 120 banner, where one of the problems that you get with like top 10 play, and I'll come back to this, I'll let you talk about this in a second, is that top 10 play used to be dominated by walls by and large. And the moment that the game got expensive, 30 people having all the same vision cards, all the same units, kind of went out the window. And so a lot of the top 10 has seen some parity with how much guilds are capable of walling certain things. And Valeria really hit the nail on the head with that Select 120. 2PM had been running this. And to be fair, JP had, I think, to some degree as well, but I don't think it was to this level of utilization or adoption. But it certainly, I think, was around. But really cool to see a team like Valeria, or a guild like Valeria, put this together and kind of shake things up and not only beat these top guilds, but force their hand to swap things around. Yeah, I don't know. I'll pause there. What did I miss? What did I get wrong?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it definitely was used in the top ends of JP. I don't think that. I mean, JP's top guilds don't tend to like use the same defense on a daily basis, but it was in the rotations of some of the top guilds for quite a while, especially on this particular map that we're on right now, because this strategy with like the turn one haste from Luciel, and then just kind of it's basically just a rush strat that, you know, we've seen similar things to this with Luciel in the past, but certainly with other units where you get the early turn advantage, you kind of bait out the other side from, you know, not being able to use their second buff, and then the fight kind of snowballs from there. But that's the main idea and kind of gimmick with this team, and it works to perfection on this map if you are able to tune it right. It's not without counterplay, and, you know, certainly it can be countered very easily, but I think that, yeah, like you were saying, the good, you know, the ticket that we got from the 5th anniversary, and kind of being able to select 3 units. These were the 3 units we kind of rated as our tier 1 units, and you can see that Valeria's been putting them to good use. So couldn't have come at a better time to kind of, you know, put some more competition, you know, into the top 10, and it's been great to see.
Yeah, actually, we're going to show a replay of it for those that want to see it in action. I think one of the coolest out of the box things here is that you turn the Lucille limit break off, which was like, I feel like kind of unheard of. I don't know many people that ever really did that. The idea being that her buff is actually 4 squares away on either side of her, that she can, if you make her the fastest unit on the field, Lucille will do her double haste buff to start, and then you just get the turn advantage and snowball. And so I do have the replay here. We will get this going. I think... Oops. No, hold on. Video player? There we go. Yeah, I think you guys can see that just fine. I'm going to click play, and this is your replay. This is you soundly defeating this team. So yeah, it's not without counterplay. But this is your version. You've actually already started your haste on the Lucille, but you'll notice here, Lucille stands still, channels that haste for both. This is actually really important whether Exia moves first or not before Shrek it, because you do get some bait potential here of who gets in a range of the other first. And so now at this point it's just a numbers game on the agility of... actually, can I pause here for a second too? This is a really cool buff. This is the Supplicant buff that you just saw Lucille apply. This is not a buff that I'd ever seen her use prior to this. This is the magic up, and it's also agility up. And so once you seal the enemy dispel capability, you're now hasted, agility up, like you're cooking and firing on all cylinders. So get that other Supplicant buff potentially, and you show him who's boss in a second here. And yeah, Shogun, that means you disable her limit break. Haste straight away means no limit break on the Lucille.
So, I mean, obviously this is showing the counter to this particular team. Correct. But normally, you know, your team would be baited out, and then Gilgamesh and Shrek would just mow you down with the follow-ups.
Correct.
So it is a very, very effective team if you're not prepared for it. So
absolutely so. And so yeah, that was just a fun conversation piece that, you know, one of the things that's going on in the top 10 as of late, and we've also gotten in arguments about this, is some stagnancy. I don't think people realize the amount of parity in the top 10 of, you know, when we look at Gemini 1, which is currently the top 6 guilds, wasn't like that the last, I don't know, what, 2 months, man? Like the last 2 months, it was just the 4 of us. Final Boss, Choco, Assure, and Howl. And there was a pretty steep drop off after the top three. I wouldn't even consider Howl in that same convo. We were very competitive. I think we're a second tier down, and I think I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry, Crimson. I'm sorry. I think we were a step above Mako, to be honest. That we just didn't have the same adoption that the top three did. But after Mako, which was a close fifth for us, 6 through 12 were just a revolving door of flavor of the week of whoever's just up and down. And a lot of people look at top 10 for like what the meta is, when realistically, like, there's a lot of factors that go on up there in terms of matchmaking, because you can predict your matchmaking very reliably for the most part when you're in those top 3 to 5 ranks. So that affects how often you change your walls. That affects which unit you use. That a lot of people look at top 10 as a quick snapshot and don't always realize some of the intricacies and the politics and the strategy that go on there. And I thought this is a fun way to kind of intertwine not only what we're seeing here, top 10 wise, from the 2 p.m. and Frozen team, but just generally speaking, like, this is a different world up here. So what we show for these teams also isn't always applicable to outside of it. Like, I doubt anyone's really seen much of that Frozen team outside of the top 10, if I had to guess. I could be wrong.
Yeah. I think, though, that basically since this select has come through, since the tactics units have come through, there has been a significant movement of the meta
Correct.
away from Sephiroth, and Exia and Sadali too are part of that conversation. But we had been complaining so long just of, Sephiroth after Sephiroth with, with Gilgamesh and with Shrek, and then with Shrek. It was just so long that he was reigning over the meta, and the game has significantly opened up here in the last, several weeks or to a month, that it's starting to feel a lot more like it used to, with, like, there's legitimate rock, paper, scissors available now. And this select ticket that came through really couldn't have come out at a better time, because three of the S tier units, 3 out of the 6 to 7 that maybe we have up there, were available to pick from that anybody could get that. So that's that really does help, in terms of, like, the competitive play in the game. So I'm very happy to see that.
Same. I know we're getting a little late here to just go to the tier list, but there's a question, and we're going to do Q&A anyway. From Ondarius, that as a guild trying to get into Gemini 3, what advice would you give to a Taurus 1 guild trying to break new ground? I mean, I'll be honest. I think it's just coordination is like 50% of it. I think guilds that are working together, that are you don't have to pull everything. You just have to be on the same page, that when you're, like, targeting which teams you're trying to hit, you're not trying to hunt for stars for your own selfish reasons of, oh, I got 6 stars today. You want to think more broadly. Well, am I hitting teams that other people should be hitting instead? And even though when you're talking about, like, defensive strategies, you want to think, like, switch it up so you don't get stagnant every single day. And there is, like, a skill to it that could be a skill diff for some people that maybe just aren't used to which toggles are best, or maybe just misunderstanding hit rates in the game or crit rates, or maybe you're not reincarnating. Those are all most certainly factors. But I think a guild that's very casual could easily crack into the next tier just by being a little more coordinated.
Yeah, I think, like, studying the meta, what the trends are, who the folks that are in your brackets. So that's going to be, 10 ranks above you, 10 ranks below you. That's going to be the pool of guilds that you're going to be facing. What are they running for teams on a daily basis? And I would imagine that, as you sort of go down the ladder, it's going to be a lot more stagnant. So it's a lot more predictable in terms
Correct.
of who you're going to be facing, and exactly what comps, where they're going to be located in terms of slot order and preference. So you can very easily start building counter teams for that. It's just, at that point, is research and how much time you want to invest in actually counter comping people. But you could easily rise the ranks by doing that.
Yep. And honestly, sharing information with your guildmates is part of that coordination. I'll be honest, I'm not a great guild offensive team builder. Like, I'm fair. Like, I can't tell you how many times I'm using JB's offense. Like, you create something, you'll post a build in that channel, and 3 of us will run it because we are kind of, everyone gets in a ruts, or maybe can't figure out a meta, and you sharing your build with your teammates. Hey, it's this loadout, it's this agility value, it's this whatever. That often, that's 18 stars right there. If you get 3 people that can run a 6-star attack, and that is, like, potentially the guild to win right there. So that's part of the coordination, is the information sharing. Yeah. Okay. All right. That's actually a good segue then to talk about our tier list, talking about the power level of these units and what's going on in top 10 and what we're seeing. And so this this one right here that you're seeing on the screen at the moment was our tier list as of October 21st. Can I zoom in? Yeah, I can zoom in more. We
So
had
this is kind of like a mini update because it's not. We usually do this like every 4 to 5 weeks, but here we have 3 weeks, and we last time we kind of said we were going to come back to it to place the tactics units because we wanted to get a little bit of experience with them ourselves before kind of putting them in there. So
I think we made the right call because there's certainly things that I didn't expect from the tactics units and things that I did expect. And Garusa obviously is a factor to consider here too with the Veritas units. I know we typically look at, and you've done these, you've put in the arrows here for units that have gotten upgrades or maybe need to be readdressed. Do you want to start here from the bottom, or how do you want to approach this? Is that okay?
sure,
Yeah.
yeah, we want to start off with the B stuff.
Yeah. So we'll start with Ice Veritas here, who got his weapon and limit break when we were talking about him lately. I personally don't know if either one of those things moved the needle on him for me. I think you made a compelling argument though about the meta condition, but I still don't know if it's worth going to A tier for him. But I could be convinced.
That's kind of why I tagged him because I have actually in arena and maybe and even kind of mucking around in Guild War a bit. I have used that mono ice team with Agarius, with Gilgamesh. It's actually very strong because Red Mage and Katana, you can use the newer job-based cards. You can fall back on any ice cards that you can, fill in from there. And it's a very strong team overall with the follow-up damage. And we are seeing less of Sephiroth and less of Summer Resnick at the moment. We're seeing an uptick in wind with Shrek and with Garusa. So the conditions are right that I feel like he's close to an A for me. I'm not sure if he quite makes it there, but I feel like it's pretty damn close.
We'll come back to him, but I agree. This is as good a chance as ever to potentially bump him up. Bold Veritas got their limit break, or they're about to this week, I think. I've tinkered with this unit. They're fine. They're actually not a bad unit. They actually do a truckload of damage versus units like Gilgamesh and Shrek, but they're also kind of a fart in the wind. Even though they have a nice barrier, they are very fragile. I'm still comfortable keeping them in B, all things considered.
I have not played around with it as much as I would like to, but I have taken a few swings with her, and I think that's pretty much how I felt too. The damage was there; it was pretty good. The follow-up removal is very strong, I think, especially if you're seeing that the 2 p.m. Frozen team, because that team is living and dying by the follow-up.
Yep.
But the survivability was so lackluster for me. Like
Yeah.
it was one shot by almost all of the top units.
Yep.
So for that reason, I don't know if I can move it into A.
Yep. I agree. Real quick here, 1 second. Okay. Koppel asked a question. Koppel, can we come back to that question, JB, if you want, or do you want to answer that now? We can.
With Exian or VC being potential partners to Greatsword, what do you think of Cloud and Joom now? I still think it's okay. I think it's actually worse than it was because Sodalee is able to remove the magic damage reduction that Joom brings to the team. And the long range of the shell removal from Exia, that is also, often getting removed early in the fight. So they're not holding up nearly as well. And you might also look at like the magic penetration reduction, which is still very strong from Joom with her debuff there. But Exia kind of gets around that with her Meteor Blast being a missile attack, and she doesn't really give a damn about the magic res penetration at that point.
Yep.
Same thing with the follow-ups from Sodalee, which are not magic attack based. So yeah, I think that it's still pretty decent, but it's taken a knock from me as it from the previous meta.
I like it. That's a good take. That's sound. All right, that brings us to Halloween Alaya. Can I have a hot take here? I should. I mean, I think she's C. I don't think she's a B unit. I know. I
Wow.
know. So here's my thing. I tinkered with her a fair amount in a variety of teams. It was primarily lightning based to start, just because Ramada and Lucille obviously like have some great natural synergy, and the Mace group in particular lines up with Spears so well because Mace doesn't really have much outside of that, and Alaya is such a glass cannon. I never actually got. She reminded me of Howlet, quite frankly, Ice Howlet early on. Where like, yeah, you could make the case that the damage was there, but the survivability was just so lackluster that when you look at the broad scheme of like all the other units you can use instead of her, I don't know why you would use her. There's like not a compelling reason why I would use her over half these other units. And she has to be paired with a healer. Like I literally don't know how you can play this unit unless you have some kind of external support. She's got none of it in the kit innately. Um, there's so much team building, handcuffing going on that I can't like actually use her in any of these teams. Maybe she'll need like a Summer Glaciella in the future, like Howlet did, to kind of see some resurgence to make up for some deficiencies. But right now, I got nothing out of her.
Mm. For me, I think that the damage is A caliber
I agree.
and the survivability is C caliber, if not maybe even worse. So I think that for me, I think she stays a B because two reasons. The the damage is absolutely there. She can, if she's invested into, like she can one tap many of the units above her in rank. Um, but she does have the two very nice seals with the courage seal and the haste seal. So good utility there. And then she does have the confusion ailment, which can come in very clutch in a lot of cases. And I don't personally run her, but I've proxied teams with her, and she's done okay. Not A caliber, but I think B is still fair for her for me.
That's fair. I was gonna ask, because to your point on the seal, I used to think the same thing. This is the, where's her haste seal? Uh, where's her haste seal?
I think it's part of that buff right there.
Oh no, this. This would I had a problem.
Yeah.
You're right. These are two good seals. The I found her getting outranged or even turn order wise because she's not fast. I was having difficulty actually getting these seals off at a proper timing window.
Hmm.
But I'll keep her B for now. I don't think it's necessary to bump her down yet. But when I see units like Howlet and Volke at 70 cost and some of the others, yeah, okay, yeah, we'll keep her there. Um,
Yeah, I mean it's not like in a strong case, but I've I don't know. A lot of those units in C, like their damage is not as good as it used to be because they don't have like the unit penetration or the area penetration.
that's
So
fair.
we kind of think back to them being like really strong damage wise, but if you use them now, they don't hit like they used to. She can though because she has like the highest unit penetration that you can get in the game with her buff. Um, so I think that's the difference for me.
Okay, good, compelling argument. I like it. That's all we had for B tier then, which brings us up to the A tier with Sottily, who we had initially placed at A, and some of that was just due to the reasons of Shreka and not having a really strong partner at the time, other than Crimson Wizard, who was fine, but more than fine, quite frankly. Actually, Crimson Wizard was very good. But there was also some vision cards that we were waiting on to come together, and now they are here. That I think he deserves a promotion. um, I think we agreed he's an easy S tier promotion. Any pushback on that?
No, I think like once we got the Exia vision card and Exia herself into the game, it's really taken him to a new level just because they work so nicely together. But getting that additional magic res penetration has really like taken his damage to like a new tier as well. Um, so yeah, he absolutely is an S tier unit.
I agree. And then Summer Resnick here was part of the S tier, but we've seen a rather large drop off of her for a variety of reasons. That's not anything about her in particular. Is it enough to drop her out of the S tier, you think, though?
This is a really tough one because up until Exia came into the game, she was the meta. She was used in pretty much every single team. I still think she's an incredible unit, and the fact that she can give the barrier seal and the follow-up removal,
Removal.
on top of just like giving barriers mid-fight and all these things. It would be hard pressed for me to move her down right now. I think it's more like meta condition wise why she doesn't feel as good right now, just because of the Exia's presence. But otherwise, like in outside of that matchup, she's still S tier.
I would agree. They're trending down, but I'm not ready to take her out yet. I still value a big part of her too as the anti-curse unit. That's her aura. Now, a lot of the S tier units have some innate curse resistance, so they're not relying on her, which is why you probably don't see her around as much. Units like Sodali and Nexia really don't have Shreka really don't have a problem with curse, so her necessity isn't really there for them. But she's necessary for every other unit if you want to try to avoid curse. But then again, if you're not seeing Sephiroth at all, then you really don't need curse resistance. So, kind of a circular, you know, cause and effect there.
Yeah. I think that the blind resistance on her aura is also another nice thing, especially with Sodali and kind of his blinds.
Yep,
We had like, some skepticism about that and how well it would work, but it works quite often, whereas some
yeah,
people can't hit you or they need to move to the side to be able to hit you. And it's added to his survivability. So that's kind of another nice thing that she can do.
I agree. I agree. So then we'll get into placing some of these units, and then we'll kind of reevaluate at the end because I think there's some others still worth talking about briefly. But Garusa, uh, honestly, very strong unit. We thought he had a short half life because of the incoming Ice Jayden in particular, but up until that point, S tier or A tier because he's one of the two.
Hmm.
I know, I know.
He's very good. Um, he's better than at least a couple of the units in A. Um,
I would
I
agree.
don't I don't think that I want to put him in S though.
I would agree.
I don't think that he's that transcendent of a unit because he is very frail. Like he can feel very frail at times with his survivability. The damage is absolutely there. He's got like some X factors with his disable attack. But the disable is actually relatively easy to shut down if you just have a trust stone of 25%, which with all the Luciel being played, you should. Um, and he's not a unit that you're probably going to be running at high faith because then it's just going to, he's going to get trucked even more so by magic. So that's a risky play to do that. So I think that A is probably high A is probably fair.
I would agree with that. It's a tough choice. For those of you watching, I had a quick question to JB before we started of like, do we stratify these even further? Of like breaking out A and B even further? Because some of these units now are getting into a territory where they're kind of borderline on both. And I think for now we are still keeping it because JB you pointed out really well. A lot of these are just matchup specific. It's not a reflection of the quality of the unit, and so I think that's enough to keep them generally grouped here. Um, yeah,
We are we'll have to see what happens with the MA3s because I feel like the D tier is prime for just getting we've had a couple of like big drop-offs, but it's like when is the last time we saw any of these units that you'd never see them. So
I
we're
would agree.
probably due for another one,
I
even though
agree.
it feels like we just did it.
I know. I totally agree. Yep. But we'll get to the tactics units, which I'm sure everyone's like on the edge of their seat for. You've waited all this time. Ramza does he even make it on the tier list? And again, we do tend to prioritize this based on auto PvP. There's certain applications that probably still give these units value, regardless,
Mhm.
but it's probably less of a defining factor. Um,
I think for me, he does make the tier list, and I've seen some compelling things with him just because of the buff is very nice. The mobility is very nice. He actually can do decent damage, like with his Shimmering Blade. Um, the one of the major problems I have with him, besides the survivability, is I really love the utility of his limit burst with the dispel and with the barrier break, general barrier break in one. That's like amazing to have in like a big AoE. The problem is like you need to like be purely be building into magic for him to favor that attack in a lot of cases. So I think that, a somebody who's like really invested into him, which I'm not going to be reincarnated him. If you do reincarnate him, I think that he's B caliber. Um, Otherwise, I would, C is probably fair, but I think that he can potentially hang in B.
I was comfortable with the C personally, um, but I'm open minded. I just haven't seen enough of him yet. Quite frankly, in Guild War application in the minimum, I've seen him in Arena a little bit as a bonus unit, but actual Guild War, not enough to round up quite yet.
Yeah.
Yep. I'll go to Delita here. I feel like Delita is an easy D for me personally, if that. Nah, he's probably D. It's probably enough there. I think there's enough there. I'm just gonna put him there.
Yeah.
Am I way off
I
on
don't,
that?
I don't think he's that far below Ramza, to be honest. I would use him over most of these units here in D
Yeah.
because he's got the silence X factor, which, it's nobody has silence resistance other than Shrek. So, um, he has that, and then like he's got a couple of good attacks. I think that the meta is horrible for him right now. That is like the biggest factor. Same thing for Ramza. Like they're both of those units are absolutely atrocious against magic damage.
Yeah.
But at least Ramza has the silence that can maybe bail him out.
Right.
He is very good against Gilgamesh too. So
Yeah.
he's
I mean,
got
yeah,
that.
Delita's always had an anti-physical niche anyway. He's never been good against magic to
Yeah.
start. So this a really bad time, but he does have some good offensive potential. So I'll give him that just as much. Actually, yeah, when you think of it that way, he's right in line with most of these units.
Yeah, I think C's fair.
Okay. Which brings us to Sid and Agrius. Sid, I'll be honest here. I'm pretty confident he's not an S tier. I think you can make the case for an A tier. I could also see B tier, quite frankly. I know that sounds weird, but I think A is probably fine. But I've seen him kind of like Bridal Elia. There are times where like I've seen him like do really well, and then other times where I just see him like gone. Almost kind of like even A2 and Eldon Bradley sometimes. Like the consistency for me, I see him go both ways quite frequently. Really awesome, really clutch, or really just nothing.
I think the caveat with these tactics units is they to be like bleeding edge, to be competitive, and that's what we're talking about here when we're kind of divvying out the tiers. These units more than others do need the reincarnation, and we kind of talked a little bit about this last week where they're, despite like the modest stat upgrades, they're just so far behind the next generation stats. They if you're not reincarnating them, they're going to feel worse than A or B or whatever.
Right.
If you do, though, I think that they're good. They're going to line up here with where we're putting them. But for me, Sid is an A. Having said that, he has the damage potential to take over the fight. He's got the penetrations are there, the attack values are there. The utility is borderline S tier, like in terms of all the different things that he can do, like with the dispels, with so much that they baked into his kit with the all the removals that he has. That it's pretty incredible that he can compete as an A unit for a year one unit, unheard of in today's game.
I don't have a strong pushback against that because I've seen him be really good. I think this is also just like a meta timing thing too, where Sottily, if he's S, these lightning units are almost unplayable into that team. I mean, I would say unplayable into that team, but yeah, still I've seen him around enough that it's working.
Yep.
Agrius is another kind of tough one. I'm gonna go A personally. I don't know if it's S. I was hoping it would be S given the how great her status ailments are, stop in particular, but even in the fights that I've been fighting her in, I don't see the stop as often as I would like, and that's at the top end. We are really good about our runes, I think, so you don't get to see that stop affecting the battle as often. The limit break's still awesome. You still have other status effects in the kit. Her survivability is actually awesome versus this magic meta. I've seen her do some special things versus Sottile and Exia that I was not prepared to see. But I'm not seeing the impact other than her just taking hits, if that makes sense, which is fine, but it's A.
I think like to that point, that's the fact that people had to change their trust stone loadouts alone
Yeah.
because she's there for me makes her S caliber, right?
Hmm.
Because if we weren't doing that, she absolutely does take over. She's got the 40% stop then, and in a magic meta, that's going to be an 80% hit rate on stop if they have no resistance. Even if they just bake in the trust zone at 25%, then it's going to be a 30% proc rate. So she still does hit that, um, from time to time, especially since it's a cross AoE, so you can hit a couple units in there potentially. So it hits a fair amount still, even at the 30%. And then you got the confusion, you got the poison. I don't think that it's S tier for me, but
Oh, I was doing it.
yeah, I wish it was S tier. Um, Unfortunately, like there is still so much shell removal now, which we hadn't been seeing as much of in the past. Like Shrek didn't have shell removal, but Exia does, and that kind of they can get around her aura a little bit. But I think that the status effect game keeps her an A for me.
That's fair. I was ready to bump her to S because it was. I do agree. And I've seen her everywhere for the most part. Um, yeah, we'll revisit this, I guess. But there was one unit I did want to circle back on, which is Summer Glaciella, where when you talk about meta timing, it has actually fallen substantially, and for a
Yeah.
lot of good reasons. A lot of it is timing related. Is it time to actually bump her down to B? I have not seen her in quite some time in the top end Guild War, and it's not even a reflection of the quality of her character. But even during like Greatsword meta, we did see some of the cracks starting to form, just in terms of like what she took even for physical damage. I'm okay putting her in B. I know we have her max reincarnated, so maybe our experience is a little bit different than some others. But I've not used her in quite some time, nor would I even consider using her right now, like in any capacity.
It might be time. I feel like she is still better for me than a lot of the units in B,
I agree.
but like the meta conditions are really bad for her right now, where she's not frankly very playable because they're like we said, there's less Sephiroths being played, and two of the better physical units that have come out recently are lightning, and that's going to include Orlando, and that is also Ramada, who absolutely blow her up. Both of them can do significant damage to her and have the courage removal.
Yep.
At least Orlando does. So yeah, I think B is fair for her at the moment.
Okay.
Just like
yeah.
the flip side to that is Dario, who we had in B before. He's risen up to A tier currently because of the meta conditions and it being purely heavy magic being played at the moment.
I like it. Anyone else? And I know we're getting a little long in the hour here, but this is mostly in place. I think it's pretty much what we were expecting. I'm not even talking about Griffith because I love him, but it's a waste of air. He's good, not that good. Move on. Thank you. Next, good for cost, maybe even debatable. I don't even know if he is, quite frankly. um, but rest of the tier wise, anyone else you want to focus on? There is still a character that's pointed out to me, but go ahead. What were you thinking?
I know that like I mean we already kind of touched on it before earlier where we're starting to feel like we need a little bit more granularity here in the list because units like Kadaj, I feel like he has really fallen off. Um, Even Fina for me, like I don't know if I think she's very good, and in certain teams she can be good, but I don't know if it's A caliber for me, at least right now. Um, but they're not. When I look at B, I don't think they deserve to be there. So that's telling me that we need for the next cycle. I think we might need to chop off D and start to diversify the list here.
I agree with that. Last ditch suggestion: is Angela still an A unit, or is she a B unit? Because we have Durand in B. I'm not gonna lie, I've used her a lot. I use her in free match right now. Actually, that's my free match team: is Angela, Lucille, and Exia. She's not bad. Not amazing. I don't know if it's worth moving her down, but I know Duran's there. We got some others that are kind of fringe. Of all the magic metas, she's not in it. You know what I mean? And she's anti magic as far as it goes, right? Like that was
Yeah.
kind of her thing. Is it
Well,
enough?
right. I mean, she has the magic reduction that she can give to the party, which only Jum has been able to do that so far. But it's getting removed now by Gilgamesh and by Sadali, so that has been a problem for her because those units are getting played quite a bit. She's okay. Like I've seen her do like some good things, and I've seen her clutch out some fights actually with the when the teammate dies and she gets the buffs and the heal back. Um, she's actually her damage is actually improved as well, like with the devout cards coming in. It's a tough call because I see where you're coming from on that, and I've kind of have felt it as well. But she's better than B,
Okay.
so I think it kind of falls into that same argument for me where
Yeah,
we need some more stratification here in the tier.
I agree. I'm cool. Yeah, I'm cool with that. That's a good assessment. Okay, but we will pause there because that's everything we wanted to go over. I think we've addressed almost all the questions in the chat throughout the time as it's permitted. I know we were going to do a little bit of a Q&A session maybe, but we are getting a little long here, and so hopefully we've answered what you had in the meantime. If not, please leave them in a comment or DM us directly. We'll make sure to address it next week if we hadn't already. But I'm pretty comfortable with this final tier list for what it is. We will tweak this next time going forward because I think it's time to say goodbye to some old friends. But yeah, anything
Yeah.
else you want to talk about here?
I don't think so. I mean, we got potentially some fun news coming in this week with an unknown character we haven't seen before. But if not, it'll be Nichol, and we kind of went over him, so that'll be fun. So otherwise, we'll see you next time.
Absolutely. Thanks everybody for joining us. We'll talk to you soon.